The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Deep Space Nine episode, Hippocratic Oath. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going, Dom?
Very well, thanks. And Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, follow The Secrets of Star Trek in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or at our YouTube channel, where you should also hit the bell to get notifications. And I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network that I'm sure you're going to enjoy called The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss all the technology news and cool, interesting technology tricks, tips, hacks, and stuff from a distinctly Catholic perspective. You can find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/technology.
So you're like telling people how to hit the enter key in a Catholic way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. There is a specifically Catholic approved way to type on your keyboard.
And how to turn it off and turn it back on again.
Tune in for that on our podcast. So we're talking about Hippocratic Oath. This is a fourth season episode. We're jumping back and forth, as you know, from first season to fourth season of DS9. And this is the third episode of that season. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of this story?
Miles and Julian are in the Gamma Quadrant and are on their way back to the station when they're shot down by a group of Jem'Hadar who are holed up on a planet. It turns out that the Jem'Hadar First is miraculously free of the race's addiction to Elmer's glue, and he's brought his men here to cure them too so they can stop being slaves. But the attempt to cure them isn't working, and he forces Dr. Bashir to try to find a cure for Elmer's glue addiction. Bashir agrees, but Miles is adamantly opposed and wants to escape and leave the Jem'Hadar to die. Bashir pulls rank on him, having seen that the First is growing a sense of morality without the glue. While doing an errand for Bashir, Miles escapes the Jem'Hadar who is guarding him. Convinced it's the only way to save Julian's life, he returns to camp and blows up Julian's equipment, so there's no way he could find a cure now. The First lets the two of them escape in the runabout, but stays behind, hoping to kill his men so that they won't have to die slow, agonizing deaths. Meanwhile, back at the barn, Worf is being overly zealous about rooting out crime on the station. He ends up interfering with and partially ruining a sting operation Odo and Quark are conducting together on a smuggling ring. In the end, Bashir decides not to reveal what Chief O'Brien did and not have him brought up on charges. And Odo decides not to report Worf's actions, though Sisko learns of them anyway and tells Worf he'll fit in on the station just fine as soon as he learns it's not run like a starship. The end.
So just one little interesting point. The first, Goranagar, was played by Scott McDonald, who was also Tosk in the first season episode, Capture Pursuit. So if you recognize him, he looked a lot alike. The makeup between the two looked a lot.
On the set, when they were like, "Don't I know you? I am Tosk."
Yes. Well, I am Groot, so there. So the title of the episode is Hippocratic Oath. And just for those who may not be familiar, that's an oath that doctors take. It's an ancient oath, right? But it's not a
kind of sort of take, not always really.
It's kind of a tradition, though.
Right. Yeah. So what is the Hippocratic Oath, and like how does it bear on this episode, do you think?
Oh, well, okay. So the Hippocratic Oath has a number of different clauses, including not providing help for abortion.
Mm-hmm.
But its general thrust is medicine needs to be practiced for the benefit of the patient. And like one of the maxims that's associated with Hippocratic Oath is first, do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so it's meant to give a set of ethical guidelines to physicians where in the original version, they're swearing all this to either Apollo or Asclepius, I forget which, but it gives them guidelines for practicing medicine in a way that will actually help the patient. And so it's kind of loose, but that's essentially what we have going on here, Julian's medical ethics are overriding or what one interpretation of what they should do, which for Miles is like, we're prisoners. Our duty is to escape. Let's get out of here. We're not here to help these people. And Julian's medical ethics are pushing him in the other direction. And so even though the Hippocratic Oath is never actually invoked in this episode, medical ethics are at the center of it.
Okay. Yeah, and his reasoning is also has military reasoning behind it as well, which is if we can free the Jem'Hadar from their addiction to the white, we can undermine the Dominion's military power.
And Miles has the perfect comeback to that, or they could start marauding through the galaxy on their own, and the Dominion's keeping them on a tether.
Right. So that's an interesting point. Well, and that the other aspect of the important aspect of this plot in the story is this relationship between O'Brien and Bashir. They are friends within this hierarchy.
And I had in my notes because at the beginning of the episode they're having a conversation, and it's very clear that they become friends at this point, and they weren't always. And it's nice to see them just relating as friends. Yes,
and that is tested when it comes because at heart, Starfleet, despite all of its protestations otherwise, is a military hierarchical organization with people of higher rank and people of lower rank. And O'Brien is lower ranking than Bashir, and Bashir pulls rank.
And that's the one difference with DS9 is that it actually did introduce the enlisted ranks, which Chief O'Brien is an enlisted NCO, non-commissioned officer. So he, even though he's got many more years in Starfleet than Bashir does, he is of a lower rank, and Bashir can pull rank on him.
And for once, they don't start with the rank insubordination that happens.
Yep.
When they've crashed on the planet and they've gotten out of the runabout and the Jem'Hadar have captured them, the Jem'Hadar are asking them for an explanation of what they're doing here. And on any previous Star Trek show, O'Brien probably would have just blurted out something because they're not rank conscious enough on the other shows. But on this one, O'Brien keeps his mouth shut and lets Julian take the lead, because it's Julian's place to tell the Jem'Hadar whatever they're going to be told or not told, and Miles is going to need to follow his lead.
Exactly.
Right. And so Miles, as the junior officer, should not be spouting his mouth off about here's why we're here and deciding what they get told.
Well, they're explicit about it too, where the Jem'Hadar comes up to him and, oh, you're non-commissioned officer, chief petty officer, oh, lieutenant, explicitly stating their rank of you're an officer, you're not, you're the more important one, you're the one we can kill. Basically.
Right. They hang a lantern on this disparity in rank and in authority because it's going to be a key aspect of the story.
Speaking of hanging a lantern on something, I just wanted to comment on the Worf plot line.
Okay.
So this is very quickly. This is like the third episode that Worf has been on the show.
Yes.
And so the question of how is he going to fit in is a logical question to ask. And this is a sort of transition episode for him from going from starship mode to space station mode.
Right.
And it makes sense in those terms to show him having an adjustment reaction to his new environment. But unfortunately, they've written this episode in a way that involves plot collapse disorder. Because if Odo realized that Worf was sniffing around the edges of this case, where he's conducting a sting operation on a smuggling ring, he should have just told Worf what's going on.
Yeah.
And that would have collapsed the subplot.
Right.
Because then Worf would have known what was going on, and he wouldn't be interfering and wrecking this episode, creating the drama in the subplot. And so this is another one of those instances, like the yellow face from Sherlock Holmes or the Sussex vampire from Sherlock Holmes or several other stories, where someone irrationally withholds information that would reasonably be shared in order to keep the plot going, because otherwise you have plot collapse disorder.
Right.
And this is another example of that. And I always hate it when I see that. But they do at the end try to hang a lantern on it where Worf says, well, why didn't you tell me? And Odo gives him a bunch of phony baloney reasons that are nonsense.
I was going to say, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. He would have just told him, hey, back off. I'm doing an investigation. I don't answer to you. And I'm taking care of it.
Well, and they could also handle that with Cisco, where Worf is talking to Cisco about how incompetent Odo is and all this stuff. And Cisco's like, well, just remember, you're now our operations officer, and keep your mind on that.
Right.
It doesn't just flat out say.
Sort of does.
But he doesn't flat out say, you are not a security officer. You do not pretend to be a security officer on this station. You do not interfere with a security officer. Knock it off.
Right. It's not your job anymore. And actually, I have to say, that scene where Cisco corrects Worf takes his correction without backtalk, without complaining. This is unlike, let's just say, more recent Star Trek series where people to get corrected and they have this need to backtalk because they're smarter than their superior officer.
Well, and it's also unlike Worf previously because he did backtalk on the Enterprise and got called on the carpet about it rather severely.
Right, with when Data was captain for temporarily, yes, and he took that from Data, that correction from Data, the same way though. I mean, where he took it and he said, "You're right, I'm wrong," and move on. It was, I got to respect Worf for that.
By the way, speaking of ridiculous things, and now I like this episode overall, but speaking of ridiculous things in it, there's a moment where a Jem'Hadar has been strangling Miles. And Bashir and the First break it up, and by visual inspection only, no tricorder whipped out.
Yeah.
Bashir informs Miles he has a bruised trachea, but there's no permanent damage. You can tell. Wow, they really did give you some genetic upgrades that haven't been revealed yet. If you can tell just by looking at him that he is seconds after the attack, that he has a bruised trachea, but there's no permanent damage.
Yes.
You didn't know about the Borg implants he also got that let him see through, see X-rays.
He's got tricorder eyes.
One more.
Sure.
Ridiculous thing. So they're flying along in the Gamma Quadrant, talking about Keiko and heading back to the station, and they detect, Miles says, a magneton pulse. And so I'm going, really? They're detecting a magneton pulse. So a magneton is a unit of magnetic moment in physics. So the thing to bear in mind is it's a unit of measurement. Okay. This is like saying we're picking up a kilogram pulse. I don't think you know how those words work.
Yeah.
And they dig themselves in a little bit deeper, maybe depending on your perspective, because Julian then says, "What's a magneton pulse?" And Miles incorrectly says it is a magneton is polarized magnetic energy. Well, it's a measure. It's a unit of measure of magnetic moment.
Right. But it's the sign of a damaged warp drive. So
apparently so.
Apparently.
Yeah, those kilogram pulses will give away your damaged warp drive like nothing.
Exactly.
I did like O'Brien complaining. So Keiko, if for those who don't remember, is not living on the station with O'Brien. She's living on Bajor, doing her botany thing.
But comes home on weekends or something.
Yep.
Right. And while she's away, he's living like a bachelor. That's her complaint, is because he moved his workshop into the bedroom. And he says, look, why can't she see? Bashir sympathizes and says, it's a sign of your desire for more intimacy by putting your, workshop in the bedroom where it's a sign of where you are most intimate together. And she says, and he says, you're right. O'Brien says, why can't she see that? Why can't she be more like a man?
Yeah. I love Bashir's response is like, you want her to be a man.
Yes.
And O'Brien just looks at him and says, shut up.
I like that. That was good. Starfleet being the good Samaritans they are, they detect the magneton pulse and they go looking for trouble. And they out of the whole planet, they crash land near the other ship, which is, a Star Trek trope is when you crash land on a planet, you're always going to be near the main plot device. So when we get to this dispute, right? When O'Brien tells Bashir, you can't help the Jem'Hadar by helping whoever is hurt. That's the first inclination is somebody's hurt and they're needed to help them. That's what they think is going on. And Bashir says, okay, look, I've got my Starfleet oath. I can't help the Dominion with anything that can be used against anyone else.
Right.
But my Hippocratic oath means I have to help someone in need. And so there's this is the essential conflict that Bashir is confronted with in this episode.
Right. And today in the military, medics are required to treat prisoners of war.
Yes.
So if we take an enemy soldier and he's injured, let's say during World War II, a German soldier was injured and brought to a U.S. prisoner camp, there were medics there that were military medics from the U.S. military to treat their troops. So I mean that's been a principle in military for a very long time. Now the question is, does it have to be flipped? And I was trying to look it up, and unfortunately I couldn't find anything, but I do seem to recall that there were cases where captured U.S. medics did serve, like in concentration camps, to help those in the camp.
Right.
So
like
that
they're guards, you mean, like that?
Yeah, even something like that. Although usually, obviously, they had their own. I said, I couldn't find anything specific. Now, I know for a fact there were cases where captured U.S. medics were medics to the prisoners in the camps.
Right.
Those were absolutely true.
But treating their captors, yeah.
But treating their captors, and I don't remember if that's a part of the Geneva Convention or not. So it'd be interesting to hear from others who might have more knowledge on that than me on it. But and that's where this scenario would fit in. Is it permissible for Julian as a medic in a real sense, in a prisoner of war camp, to be working to help his captors, and that of course, Chief O'Brien's like, no, that's not acceptable. We have to try to escape, which, by the way, is a part of the U.S. military code as a prisoner. That's part of it is you have to try to escape. You have to try to, if an opportunity comes, you and your fellow prisoners have to escape. That's one thing they talk about when they do POW training in the military. But again, how does this work as far as Julian's?
Right. Yeah. I was thinking that there is an element where you can appear to be helping while trying to escape. Like you can do something that aids in a non-military fashion your captor in order to gain their trust and thus survive. Like that's allowed. Right. But I have a nephew who's a lieutenant in the Army who recently went through that training, and so this it's kind of there's a lot he can't talk about apparently, but some of that has come up where with that they can gain the trust of their captors by doing things for them that are non-military, like doesn't aid them in their military capacity, but does gain their trust. It is an interesting point is that they're not yet at war with the Dominion, Starfleet, not technically. They're hostile, clearly, but there's not technically a state of war. So rules might be a little different, maybe. Yeah,
and I mean, if it is one thing if you're helping out an aggressor, it's a better way to put that, or a Cold War type. Like if in the 70s we had helped out Russia on something.
Yeah.
Because we were not in an active state of war. There was no declared war. We were not having conflicts, but we were in a Cold War with them. And that's more with this kind of situation where there might be some skirmishes, but there weren't an actual declared state of war. Interesting. I was just thinking of this is a similar situation to the movie Bridge Over the River Kwai.
Yep.
With Alec Guinness.
Yeah.
Where that's where it starts out as they are British soldiers who have been captured by Japan and they're being forced to build this railroad bridge. Well, at first they're going to do it to sabotage it.
Right.
But then Alec Guinness's character gets all, British proper British. We're going to build this the best, prisoner built railroad bridge ever. And at the end, it actually becomes a crisis for him.
Right. That's right.
Because he becomes so proud of this bridge that they've done that they actually end up, they actually end up killing British spies who were going to come in and destroy it.
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen that.
It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember there's a scene where some British special agents or special military service come in to destroy the bridge, and they actually fight them off. Right. Yeah, there's conflict among the prisoners about whether we should be building this bridge.
So this is kind of a bridge over the River Kwai sort of situation that we've got here, which is interesting.
Right.
Another small plot hole here, shall we say? So Garanagar is the Jem'Hadar first, and he's the one who's free of the Ketracel White addiction. And the way he found it out was he crashed on this planet, was the sole survivor, this very planet that they were on before, and didn't have enough white and survived without it. And so there's a couple of questions that come up, which is, how did he get off that planet? And did the people rescuing him, and when he obviously goes back to the Dominion, did no one notice that he had been out of Ketracel White while they picked him up?
Right. And then he said something like he survived like 3 days or he had 3 days reserve. And then after 3 days, he was out. And then he survived for like a month.
Yeah. Yeah. He stretched the 3 days to 8 days, and then it was a month before he was picked up off the planet.
So he must have had another ship come by and find his distress call or whatever and grab him. And, oh yeah, I just used up my last one today. Wink, wink.
I suppose that's possible that he didn't tell them. Yeah. We do get a little bit of the big picture story arc exposition with a briefing for Sisko. The Klingons, as we'll remember from the beginning of the season, had attacked Cardassia. They've pulled back after failing to defeat the Cardassians, and now licking their wounds, they're looking for their next victory. So that's sort of setting up the rest of the season here. So there's an interesting exchange between Bashir and Garanagar about Garanagar's beliefs. They see the founders, the changelings, as gods. In fact, I think this might be the first time where it's explicitly said that they're like gods for us.
I think you're right on that. That they've not seen these gods. They know they exist, but that they are very much like gods. But these aren't gods like we would understand God as he expresses it. It's a divine, it's a being that's outside of us that wants us to be with them for eternity. Thinking of heaven, spending eternity in heaven.
Right.
And they say, well, that's not our gods. Our gods just want us to fight and die for them.
Right. And he says they're like a myth. Like most Jem'Hadar have never even seen a changeling. So they're a myth to us. But it's the Vorta that they serve, that they're the more immediate threat. And it's an interesting idea that while it's the founders who are really should be the Jem'Hadar's object of fear and distrust and anger, it's really the Vorta, because the Vorta are the ones who are present in their lives. They're the ones withholding the Ketracel White and using it to keep them under the yoke. And that's an interesting subtlety that they've built into DS9, that this whole Dominion arc. I like that multi-layered subtlety that they put into that. So Bashir, we mentioned Bashir thinks that breaking their addiction to Ketracel White will free the Jem'Hadar, make them question their beliefs. Bashir sees them as people. O'Brien says they're killers, and if we release them, they're going to maraud through the universe. Bashir pulls rank. O'Brien disobeys orders. And there's this whole question, is this shades of gray or is this a black and white situation, right? Is this complex or is it very clearly this is the right thing to do?
They set it up as a dichotomy. It's either you help them or you kill them.
Yeah.
And there's no in between. And Chief O'Brien is very much again being put into he's a former soldier. He fought, he fought in multiple battles. He's seen much bloodshed, much death, and that's all he sees them as. And Bashir is looking at the other way of, well, we can rehabilitate him. We can get him away from that. And it's kind of funny it's another parallel with the Klingons. The Klingons were very much viewed that way, although they little more nuanced at times.
Yeah.
But the Klingons were very much they're the warrior race. It's, kill or be killed. And that's
Right.
what they see the Jem'Hadar as now, as, a warrior race, kill or be killed. That's all we're there for. That's all we exist for. And so I don't know. And I do think they're trying to bring in some nuance there where you can see he's much more, I don't know if compassionate is the right word, but he definitely has a much broader view on life, especially Jem'Hadar life, than just our job is to suffer, fight and die.
Right. He's not just a robotic killer, that
Right.
just kills upon command, but he thinks, he's got ideas. And both Bashir and O'Brien make good points in their respective arguments. By the way, they're you could go either way. Bashir is, especially from a Christian point of view, they are people within the realm, if we posit the Star Trek universe, that they are people who should be not treated as a mass of whatever, but they are, individuals, and you should help them. You should do what you can to help them. Whereas, O'Brien has a good point. They're also very clearly aggressive killers, and maybe if they aren't under control, they're a problem. And it's, and also their immediate situation, which is we're being held captive. So it is interesting to see that.
Yeah, and one thing I was struck is another kind of military thing that you learn is that if an order is an illegal order, you are not required to follow it. And that's what we see Chief O'Brien doing. He believes that what Julian Bashir is doing is illegal. It is contrary to Federation law, Starfleet regulations. And so he disobeys the order,
Right.
and who is in the right. And of course, they don't resolve that because Julian says, at the end, he says, I'm not going to turn you in. So they don't resolve whether or not either was in the right. They just let it lie. And of course, they kind of hang a lantern on the, we're friends. We are usually doing our darts, but we aren't going to do it now. Yeah,
right.
It's just what we know. The next episode, they'll be throwing darts again.
Right. Yeah. At the end of this one, this clearly has been a strain in their friendship over this. But yeah, Bashir's not going to report him. O'Brien is not going to, dispute what Bashir did. And they're just going to kind of go take a break. We're on a break from hanging out. But yeah, they'll be back together again as buddies.
Which, admittedly, that's kind of refreshing. We're not getting the, 2 episodes, 3 episodes later. Do you remember when you did this?
Yeah, right,
No,
right. Holding a grudge.
We don't really care.
Yeah. In the end, O'Brien. It's interesting how O'Brien has a sort of a grudging respect for Garanagar the First. Who takes his duty as commander. Like his men are dying. They're starting to suffer, and he's going to stay and put them out of their misery, which is, admittedly not something that we would, assisted suicide of this kind is not something that we would approve of. But in the sense, he's sacrificing himself to his duty to his men in this case, which O'Brien can respect.
Same idea. The captain goes down with his ship type of deal. That the captain's the last one off. The commander is the last one to survive.
Yes. And it's kind of proves Bashir's point, which is that the Jem'Hadar are not just unrepentant, unredeemable killers, that they are capable of more. And so that's kind of an interesting point there. And then at the end, I kind of like this exchange between Bashir and O'Brien. Bashir says, O'Brien had said I had to do it. I had to disobey you. And Bashir says, you didn't have to, Chief. You had a choice, and you chose to disobey orders, override my judgment, and condemn those men to death. And O'Brien says, yes, I did, because I thought it was the only way to save your life. Whatever else you may think of who I am and what I did, at least try to understand that. And that's really interesting nuance. It's like it's not just one is right and one is wrong.
Yeah.
This is the sort of thing that made Deep Space Nine so good. Is it always? It wasn't always just a clear black and white. This is the right thing that happened. This is the wrong thing that happened, and so on and so forth. It really did explore these nuances and these complexities in the way things are.
Well, they balanced Bashir's optimism that he could find the solution because he's the miracle man. He's the wonder savior, and Chief O'Brien's experience of no, these are killers, and they're going to use us until we've met their needs, and then they're going to kill us because they aren't going to want to just send us on our way and let people know that all of a sudden this had happened. And I can see it from the Jem'Hadar's viewpoint too. If they're going to say, if these two Federation Yahoos get off this planet, they're going to let them know that, hey, we've got a cure for Ketracel White addiction.
Right.
And the Varta aren't going to like that.
Yes, and they're going to hunt us down. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it is likely that they would have killed them to save themselves, or at least possible. But I think that both Bashir and O'Brien had good arguments to support themselves, and it's not clear that one was right and one was wrong. And that's something that comes out with Sisko and Worf, because at the end of that episode, Sisko's got Worf in his office again, and he's talking to him about fitting in and about shades of gray. That, Worf, it's not just clear that Quark is a criminal and therefore should be arrested. There are shades of gray when you're out here on the frontier dealing with the complexities of what's going on. It's not like being on the Enterprise.
Yeah, they're not dealing with the strict regiment of a military. I mean, a Starfleet, because of course they're absolutely not a military.
Right.
That things are the crimes are going to be pretty petty compared to what you're going to find out on a frontier space station.
Right.
I think that's one of the things that I've liked about DS9 is it very much has kind of the Old West feel, without being not quite like Firefly, the series Firefly, of course, but. But it's got kind of that Old West. We're on the frontier. This isn't an established part of the Federation. This isn't, civilization. This is where civilization is really being reestablished, you could say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. That is true. That's one of the things that really made DS9 good is that it was so different from the other Star Trek that had come before, and it was exploring, if not literally in a starship, exploring the frontier. Yeah. It was exploring a different kind of frontier than we'd seen before.
And it did take a while to get its footing, and that's why we're in the middle of an episode or season 4 episode right now.
Right. We'll go back to season 1 next time we come around to DS9. But yeah, this is season 4 is where the series really got its legs under it and really took off. And I think that's we can agree this episode is a good one. I have to note that the writer for this one, Lisa Klink, was an intern on the script writing staff and was given this opportunity to write this episode based on that. So it's kind of interesting, as a first outing on a real script. And Ronald D. Moore had an uncredited polish on it, so that's
sure,
clearly. And it was pitched as 2 different stories. There were 2 different story pitches. One, the Jem'Hadar one, and then the Worf one. So it was kind of interesting.
Sure.
Anyway, so any other last thoughts on this episode?
I should just mention, because I don't think we did, is that the reason why Gronagar, the first, did not need the Ketracel White is he had a mutation. It wasn't something from the planet.
Yeah.
That it ended up being, it wasn't something from the planet. It wasn't the air. It wasn't the crash. It wasn't anything like that. It was just the fact that he had a mutation when he was cloned that caused him to produce the Ketracel White naturally. So there wasn't, unless Bashir could have figured out what was causing this, what gland or whatever he had that would cause it. And of course I don't see any glands that do it. It's like, well, there's got to be one somewhere.
Right.
But, something's got to be producing it. But unless he could figure that out and create it for the other Jem'Hadar, there would be no cure.
One other behind the scenes note, this episode was directed by René Auberjonois. So the actor who played Odo. So very interesting direction from him on this. A good job on this one from him.
Yes.
All right. I think that should do it for us this time. You'll note that Jimmy had to leave us in the middle of the recording, so that's why you haven't heard from him in a bit. But
he waved at us and disappeared.
Yeah, he had something else he had to go do. So that's fine. We'll hear from him next time we talk about Star Trek. But before we finish up, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Stephen E., William C., Jeremy S., Joanne M., and Christine G. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us each week. So that's it from us. What did you think of Hippocratic Oath, this DS9 episode? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Voyager episode, Faces. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me in sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
And Jimmy Akin, thank you wherever you are. And live long and prosper. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, I wish I was on this trip with someone else. That's what I wish. Hi, everyone. This is Dom Bettinelli, CEO of StarQuest, with a special message as we approach the Christmas season. This past year, the StarQuest network has continued to expand our mission of exploring the intersection of faith and pop culture through our many entertaining and informative programs. Now we need your generous financial support to reach new audiences with more of the life-changing and uplifting programming we've been creating for more than a decade. That's why it's very important that we hear from you this Advent and Christmas, the time when nonprofits receive most of their support for the year. If you are already a supporter of StarQuest, we thank you and ask you to prayerfully consider increasing your support at this time. If you're not yet a supporter, please become one now. Every gift counts. Could you give $15 or even just $10 per month? Whatever level of support you can offer, please show your support for SQPN this Christmas. And remember that your gifts may be tax deductible. Just go to sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give. May God bless you this Advent, and may you have a blessed Christmas season.